Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to talk about what is an Android virtual device or an emulator. These are basically pieces of software that help you see your application on your computer. So let's go ahead and see how we could actually use one of those. I'm actually going to close this one down. I'm going to go find Android Studio. And once your Android Studio loads, you should be able to see something similar to mine. You should see the welcome page, which should look something like this one. So what you want to do is this. You want to go ahead and say start a new Android Studio project. And once you start there, some of the things that I tell you these earlier stages is that I want you to just kind of follow me without really wondering what they exactly do, because there are some of the areas that we need to come back to them later on. But for now, because we want to get some results quickly and we want to build some confidence, I want you to just follow me along. So here, what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and say phone and tablet, empty project or empty activity project. And in here, you want to go ahead and put it in a certain folder and you want to choose the language to be Kotlin. So these early settings for our application are quite important, but the good news is that we only need to do this just once. And then from that point on, for the most part, they're going to stay intact. Let me talk to you a little bit about what they are. The first thing up in here is the name of your application. Let's say I want to call this one application my emulator application. It doesn't matter what you call it, but for now I'm just going to give it a name that I know what it is. The second thing is the package name, and this package name is actually quite important simply because you want to offer it a name that becomes quite unique. A very common practice in the industry is offering it the reverse of the name of your website. So in my case, the name of my website is oddinstitute.com. So the reverse of it becomes com.oddinstitute. So if the name of your company is, for instance, example.com, what you do is you just go ahead and say com.example, and then automatically the Android Studio concatenates the name of your application at the end of it. The reason this is an important practice is simply because when so many different developers, they upload their applications to the Android Play Market, we all want to have our different names and we want to have them as unique names. So no one other than me is going to have this particular domain. And because of that, this name is absolutely unique. And then my application, I'm going to make sure that I don't have another application with this name in my basically repository. So this is a way of making sure that your names are basically unique. Then you have the save location that you want to actually find the space for it. In my case, I'm actually going to put it in here in my users, Amir desktop, this particular folder. You want to choose the language to be Kotlin because that's what we use. In the older days, not really older, but just up until about 2 years ago, we used to do a lot of Java programming. These days, we do a lot of Kotlin. And lastly, the very important thing in here is using a minimum SDK. This is something that we're going to talk about in more details in the future. But this basically means what API of the various APIs of Android are we targeting. The higher that you go, you get more features. You get features that are very unique to Android version 10 or Android version 11, so on and so forth. But obviously, the higher you go, you limit the number of the devices that you can target. For instance, with version 27, we can actually get about 53% of all the devices. This is kind of an approximate, but you can kind of trust it. If you go to say version 30, you would get less than 1% because not many devices are using this version. If you go to something much lower, let's say 24, we get about 73% of the applications. So something that I'm going to set as a rule of thumb for the rest of this course is that for almost everything we stick to version 27, and there are a few reasons for that. You will see when we get to them. There are a few libraries that we use that they only work with version 27. I feel like Android Oreo 27 is kind of giving us what we need in terms of the functionality, and also is giving us a good number of the more recent devices. 53.5%, even though you might feel that you are not getting 50% of all the devices, it also means that almost any device that has shown up in the past 3 or 4 years, you can get access to them, which is really a great thing for any application that you want to develop. So we had that, we say these are our settings, and we're going to say finish, and we're going to build our project, and then Android Studio is basically going to open up with our new application. So the moment the Android Studio opens up, you can actually get rid of this tip of the day, and then I'm going to maximize it in here. You really don't need to worry about any of the things that we see in here right now. We're going to talk about all of these in details. We're going to learn what do they do. The one thing we want to learn right now is how can we actually show this application on an actual device or on an emulator. How can we see what this application does? Obviously, we can't expect this application to do a lot for us right now, but even if it's just an empty application, we should be able to see it somewhere. And that is where Android Virtual Device basically comes into play. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to go to Tools, Android Virtual Device Manager, or if you want as an alternative, you can actually go to this little button up here, which has got like a little device with the shape of a half an Android on it. So you can go to either of those two. I'm going to do AVD Manager. And what you want to do is you want to actually add a new virtual device. I currently have two virtual devices in here. I think one of them doesn't work and the other one does work. And I'm actually going to go ahead and make one new one so we actually get a sense of how do we create ones. So in here, if you don't have any Android virtual devices, which you probably don't, but let's go ahead in here and press this little plus button, create new virtual device. And we have to do a few things in here. The first thing you want to do is you want to actually choose what kind of device you want to emulate on. For the most part, these devices, they either use a similar size, which is usually 1080 by 1920, or they use a size that is actually proportional to that. So for the most part, you can get away with using the same device for almost all of your tests. In my experience, I have found Pixel 2 to be one of the better testing virtual devices. So if you want to just follow along with me, you can use that one. So you choose the device that you like to choose for a test. Let's say Pixel 2. I'm going to hit next. And then the next thing you have to do is you actually have to decide which version of Android you want to try on that device. And this is where things that are becoming a little bit more tricky and become more important. So in here, you have to actually choose the same API level that we decided earlier on. Even though this isn't a necessity, but I feel like it's a good idea that we do everything on the same level of the API. This way we will minimize the level of confusion of the things that might happen. So I'm going to actually choose Oreo version 27. If you don't have it, you actually have to go ahead and say download. If you press the download for any of these things, it's actually going to give you a little message, and it's going to take a little while before it can actually download that one. So here I'm actually going to go ahead and hit the download. It's going to tell me if I'm okay with the license agreement and everything, and I hit accept and I hit next, and it's going to take a little while before it can download the whole thing. Usually the API levels are something about a gigabyte. This one is like 875 megabytes. So once you're done with the download, you will end up seeing this in here, that the ones that they are downloaded, there is no more download button in front of them, and they actually have a slightly darker color. And once you are there, you can continue with this video. I'm not going to actually wait for the download simply because I don't want to keep you guys in here. You can pause the video in here. Once you are done with the download, you go ahead and hit next. And the last thing you have to do in here is you just have to give it a name. So I'm actually going to go ahead and call this one API 27 GP. The reason I'm calling it GP, if I show you once again, is that because we are using one of the recommended system images, which is using Google Play services. And this is quite important. Later on in the course, when we want to use the Google Play services, such as connecting to Firebase or connecting to various APIs, we need to have one of the system images that they have Google Play enabled, and all the recommended ones, they actually do that. So we don't really need to develop anything using the x86 or the older images. We can stick to the recommended ones. So here I'm actually going to go ahead and call it API 27 GP. And I think that's about it. And then you hit finish, and it's going to take a little while, and it's going to create a new virtual device in here for you. Now, the moment you have the virtual device in here, it means we can actually use it to run our application. And to do that, here is what we're going to do. We're going to go to this little drop down menu on the top. That is the one next to the run button. And you're going to choose the correct one that you want to run on it. If you have a device connected to your machine, you might see that one. And if you have other virtual devices, you might see them. The one I'm interested in is this one, API 27 GP. So I'm going to select that one. And then I'm going to hit the run and compile button that is next to it. I'm going to press that. take a little while. Let me actually hide this one, and it's going to boot up this one for us, which is an Android emulator. And in this Android emulator, we are actually going to see our application. Depending on whether this is the first time you're loading it or if you have loaded it before, it might take a little while. You have to be a little bit patient with it. Usually it shouldn't be more than about a minute. Again, it really depends on the type of device that you have and the type of computer and the processor you have, but it usually shouldn't take a very long time. So now my application is actually loaded in here. And again, we didn't really expect to see a lot because we haven't really done anything on our application. Our application is just showing us a text hello world. But it shows us that it's working in the emulator. Everything is set up properly. There's a right connection between our Android Studio with our emulator. So that's what we were expecting to see. Everything is working. And now we are ready to move on to our next lesson.